Hello and welcome back to Mix Presents Sound for Film and Television. We're here now to talk about efficiencies, especially stealing back the time to be creative, integrated efficiencies in post-production workflow. We want to thank our sponsor, Adobe, for bringing us this excellent panel. And we'd like to thank the audience for coming back and joining us. This is an interesting panel, and it describes a new way of working, one slightly outside the traditional workflow you might imagine, based on today's need for speed. Joining us are Eric Hoen, re-recording mixer, sound designer, recently won 2 Emmys for The Queen's Gambit. Congratulations, Eric. Very much appreciated. And we have Mark Leombruni, who comes with us from the Vice Media Group, where he's director of post-production operations, operating out of Brooklyn and offices in Los Angeles, but you're all familiar with Vice, cutting edge, fast-paced, live news and event programming. And Durin Gleaves, who is the product manager at Adobe, but does so much more, and with a background in recording and post-production, as I understand. One of the things we'd like to talk about is this sort of trend that's been going pre-pandemic in post-production, where there's less time, smaller budgets, and fewer crew. It's sort of the way the world is working. So, Eric, over the last 5 years, you've seen some transitions here and seen what's happened. Can you describe for us the typical sort of bugaboos or bottlenecks that might take place in changeovers in post-production, how it worked in film?
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest change, or we call them turnovers, it's when the picture department hands over to the sound department. And this includes a picture file of the current cut, an AAF with the clips, multi-track clips from their picture editing timeline, and any other sort of things that can help us, guide tracks that help us reference precisely what the editor is hearing. So in case there's a problem with the AAF, we can have a reference track to see what exactly they were listening to. And really what we're trying to do is take all that raw material and edit it and mix it into something cohesive, and then send it back in a form of some sort of stems, again, which are dialogue, effects, and backgrounds and music. So then the picture editor can reintegrate that updated work back in their timeline. And that handoff will repeat over and over and over again for weeks throughout the post-production process until we are finally at a final mix stage where we can listen to it for the last time in a theatrical environment.
Mark, we like to complain in feature film post-production, there's no time. You live in a daily world. I mean, I equated earlier to the fact I work at Mix Magazine, a monthly, but then I also worked at the San Francisco Chronicle, a daily. Very different worlds. How would you describe that need for speed and sort of the bottlenecks you faced when you had to develop a new workflow?
Yeah, I mean, I think our ability to, capture current events and turn them around to kind of like a cohesive narrative and story and getting it out there is kind of the crux of, creating relevant news in a good model. We've moved all of our editing production over using, Adobe Premiere, and we do all of our mixing and color grading in Adobe Premiere as well. And, just like Eric mentioned, throughout the edit and the process, people can be working, can be mixing, can be, color grading, doing looks. And that just really saves a lot more time in the end when something has to go to air. A few weeks ago, there was a story about, America pulling out of Afghanistan. At the end of August, there's a lot of developing stories that was going on. So we put together, a compilation of the content we've done in the past and covered in Afghanistan, and as well as what's currently going on. And I would say we did a 60-minute episode in about 24 hours in terms of mixing and coloring and turning it around to air on broadcast for Showtime. And, it's all about focusing on working with the post-production workflow, working with the editors, focusing on the finishing process, starting as early as ingest. So, we definitely feel it from our nightly news show on, Vice TV to, more weekly content that's still time sensitive like Showtime.
It's an incredible integration of production and post that has to be out immediately. And we're going to get to your process there in a minute. But Durin, I want to know, like, somebody who's been involved in production and post production for a long time, I mean, what led to sort of this idea of let's have a unified, integrated workflow? I mean, what did the company perceive as the sort of things that slowed down and took away from creativity? What were they?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's really what we heard from users, from people out in the field, that that luxury of long long schedules and a dozen member audio teams just were happening less and less. And with so much more content than ever being created, the whole, on the whole spectrum of platforms and deliverables, it's just, it's almost unmanageable to expect a pro audio team to be able to do what they do on every single piece of content that goes out. So we really started to say, okay, what can we do to make those people more successful at getting, the same high standards that they hold themselves to, but without being overburdening the audio teams who are working on maybe more higher profile content, or some of the content that's destined or has longer production cycles than those quick turnarounds.
Before we get to Mark's specific process, Durin, just to make it clear, we're not talking about one person does all. We're not talking about one person does video, one person does audio. We're talking about sort of a rolling, simultaneous pass through of audio and video.
It's a good question. I mean, there's certainly the one person teams or they'll use what they're comfortable with, but you've got small teams, you've got in-house teams of brands and agencies who are producing content every day, all the way up to maybe people working for larger teams or contracted to work for larger projects, but they still they don't have the luxury of specialization like we all used to have before. You have to be more generalist in your approach, and if that means audio understanding and doing a little more video, or video understanding and doing more audio, we kind of step up to fill those gaps.
Well, let's go into Mark. Let's describe your operation, which is what some of our audience might not be as familiar with. But it's sound for picture. It's fast-paced it's production and post-production almost simultaneously, it feels like. Could you talk a bit about, very simply, how the audio comes in? They go to the nonlinear editor. Who's making choices? How does a typical program work?
Yeah, so content might come in on multiple cameras or web feeds, and we'll have assistant editors kind of ingest the material into Premiere, break it down into different scenes throughout the day, and then from there we ask the assistant editors to go through and kind of pick the best camera mics and sources, right? So maybe the laugh sounds better in a certain scene or a boom in the others. We can always go back and option it later, but that really helps the editors, right? So the AEs go through and organize it, kind of pick the best clip from start. Then as the editors are cutting in their scenes, they're kind of only cutting in the better sources, right? So it reduces the amount of organization time that we have. From there, we have like a standardized template that will organize our clips and give us stems when we're done for exporting. So like dialogue only, music, sound effects, etc. And the editors use a great tool in Adobe called Essential Sound, which will go through and kind of set a general level, like, an LKFS for dialogue, a general one for music. So just right out the bat, editors can work with a cut and have a nice balance between clear dialogue, music that supports it, ambience and sound effects that pop up. And they don't have to bog themselves down with, constantly watching meters or covering faders. A lot of the great thing about, Premiere is all that is built into, a workflow in the system. Once they're done kind of doing the edit and we're in more of a fine cut stage, then it's passed off to a mixer and also, a colorist as well, but we'll talk about mix today. So it's simply, we just take the Premiere project and we all work on like a cloud-based media system. So even though we're working remotely, in different locations and around the country, everyone can still connect to the raw media, originally. And the mixer will go through and they'll focus on, EQing every single clip, doing audio restoration, blending, adding more sound effects as needed, really put the artistry that will help tell the story and the narrative of what's going on. And then they simply save the project and just send the project file back to the editors. And then from there, it goes into online. So, we don't have to spend time prepping AAFs or OMFs. There's no need to print or export stems passing off the process. And the great thing is, as editors keep cutting, they might change or expand a scene or add new elements, new voiceover. You can simply just grab the project back and send it to, a mixed professional, and then they can tune up that little spot and then send like the, 5-10 megabyte file back. So it's really helped the process, keeping it all inside
bits and bytes rather than just passing and waiting, passing. Well, it's interesting to me when you talk about templates, because one of the things that the great Walter Murch once said to me was, we are sold these workstations on the promise of freeing up time. All they've done is delayed decision making. And it sounds like in a way, by setting up the template, by establishing a base, in some sense, you're making decisions early, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
sort of
absolutely.
Deciding what's important. Eric, one of your goals in the last couple of years certainly has been getting involved with picture earlier, and that's to make decisions earlier, correct? I mean, this seems to be a theme throughout. So why don't you tell us about what your process has been like and how it's changed in the last few years?
Just listening to Mark, I'm jealous that everyone works within the same program. I think that's just one of the things with picture and sound. You're in different platforms. Picture might be working in Premiere or Media Composer, and then sound, we're just always working in Pro Tools. So that unified handoff is a little different. But yeah, Tom, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about decision making, and that was really the inspiration and the motivation to get involved very early on, is to begin making those decisions and get in the habit of picture making those decisions so early on. Traditionally, picture editors and directors are used to making decisions about sound at milestone post events, like the temp mix or the final mix or the pre-dubs,
or the preview.
Yeah. You're using these milestones as ways to think about the sound and make decisions on the sound. Hey, the T-Rex in that scene, we need to try it again. And then someone will, whoever's making the T-Rex sound will go back. They'll work on a new T-Rex sound for the team to hear, maybe at pre-dubs or, a few weeks later. What we're finding, our team is finding, is that building those new habits on a weekly basis, where we're turning over iterative improvements on those stems back to the picture editor, well, they gain confidence in understanding really what's going on at a very granular level. But then also they can say, okay, we love the chess pieces, don't touch them. We love the clocks, don't touch them. But that all that air or ambience you added for the halls, we don't really need it, because music is going to be a player there. And then it becomes a real collaboration at that point. We're talking about sound the way a team should talk about it.
Durin, what's been your experience? Because you come from the working world as well. I mean, it always puzzled me in the early 90s when I went down there. Like, music at that point, music and effects weren't even really talking to each other within the sound world. So the idea of talking with pictures seems foreign a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it. Mark mentioned the work that we did around the Essential Sound panel, and what and the reason for that wasn't just to offer a simple interface for audio, but it was allowed teams to have a consistent approach to it. So, through this kind of templatized approach, even if there is a handoff to audio at the end, and it doesn't matter who the editor was, as long as they've been using the same shared templates, then they're getting a consistent input into sound for that post process, rather than having to start and kind of guess every single time. Oh, who's this? What do they mean by making this louder? Is this on purpose? Is this an accident? And bringing that sort of intention-based approach to the types of content. I think
some of it is just some of it is just stripping away the bullshit tasks in a way, right? I mean, by making those decisions early, you establish a base. Yeah, correct. Exactly. And that's a goal of sound. Mark, establishing that base. I mean, Vice has an identity at this point. So I would presume that your programs run through, a certain standard and base level. And call them templates, call them whatever you want. Could you talk about that, the consistency that you get out of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I described a little while ago, we had, a piece that was, airing on Showtime. It was 60 minutes, and we had, about 24 hours to turn it around in terms of just the finishing side of it. So, if you break it into segments and you have, one or two mixers work on it, you want to make sure that, what one mixer does in one scene, the volume and the tone of dialogue will match what the other one's doing, right? Obviously, someone goes back and does a conform pass to make sure it all sounds consistent. But using the same tools has been immensely helpful, especially when working with a large team of editors. So like if everyone uses the same reference point for dialogue, let's say like -23 LKFS, you know, um, like our broadcast standard average for volume. There's no more necessarily subjective saying, oh, it's too loud or it's too quiet. I just know that if I take two different acts or reels of a segment and put them right next to each other, I know that the dialogue is going to be a consistent level between them. And that just saves so much time in quality control, and getting that sort of consistent product. And that's what you really need to do is you divide the labor, and then everyone kind of works in concert and brings it together when you're trying to do these kind of rush pieces that are important to do in time, because of a breaking news, or current events.
It's so funny because mixers used to like look forward to a reel change so they could go play ping pong, right? But now, but now you can take that sort of out of the equation. Well, some of this type of process that you're talking about almost seems it could be, I don't want to say automated because that scares people, right? Anything that's templated or automated, people get afraid of. But what that really does is establishes a base. And what we have in technology now is like opportunities in machine learning. We have opportunities in artificial intelligence. We have opportunities that you can have a plugin, make it sound like it was mastered by the same person who did Beyonce. You can do these things with technology. So, Mark, let's start with you, and we'll go around the table to finish up and say what's coming, and what do you look forward to? I mean, how do you even improve upon this and create more efficiencies?
Well, I think the story of this workflow kind of came from the necessity of breaking news, but kind of going into what Eric's saying is not all of what Vice does is like nightly or rush news. We have lots of episodic content. We produce hundreds of content of hours a year, unscripted fiction, whatever. And what we've done is we've taken what we've learned from this kind of quicker turnaround process and put it into shows that have this longer turnaround time. And what it does is it gives people a lot more time to edit, to work, to be creative. And I think like that's what excites me, whereas, we started having to do 5 days for a 30-minute, episode mix, we've got it down to a day and then like a half a day for review and notes and export, and that is 3 or 4 days added to edit and review and creative time, it helps with budgets so we can actually hit more projects across the company. It's not that we're rushing, it's just like we're kind of, because we don't have to spend time conforming or doing maybe more of the mundane tasks of picking and like basic leveling. We get to spend more time doing stuff creatively, like composition, sound design, and telling more of a story, working with producers. So we're trying to push it as far as we can, and we've moved almost all of our production over to doing audio finishing in Premiere, and it's great. We keep tackling more and more content, so I'm excited to see what new features Durin will drum up in the next year or two.
It's funny. It doesn't just save you more time to be creative, and also you might get home for dinner one night a week. You might make it home in time for dinner. You might see your kids play. Eric, you started. There's obviously a lot of reasons you might want to talk to picture early, but certainly establishing that efficient way of working is one of them. I mean, creativity, efficiency. What does this sort of style work for you? What does it do?
Well, I think it's what it does for me is it's, especially when it's well organized and well thought out and there's a plan, it's always nice to be working towards a mission, to be working towards a goal. I think that's what's exciting to me. And I think while we're still sort of in this period of professional post sound where platforms are separate, where video editing is one platform and Pro Tools and Pro Audio is another platform. The things that our team and our picture departments that we work with, we're looking at project management tools that Silicon Valley companies use. Things like, Slack is a messaging tool, but we look at a platform like Asana, and we use a platform called Pipefy. And these are basically work management, task management tools where you can load on a bunch of people to it, your whole team, picture and sound and music and VFX. And basically everyone can see where things are at, who's working on what, and it just virtualizes this feeling you once got when you were all able to be in a cutting room together. I don't know when we're going to go back to that, but I'm sure we will eventually. But there are some. It may not be this full-time thing like we had in the past. So it's amazing to be able to virtualize the project management and the organization of the resources, the people who are the talent who are working on these projects.
Oh, absolutely. Durin, I mean, you live in a technology world as well. And when you mentioned Silicon Valley, Adobe comes out of the heart of Silicon Valley, correct? I mean, but there's the future is there. There's artificial intelligence. There's machine learning. There's VR, XR, AR coming up. I mean, you're not only addressing the production side, but you're also addressing the sort of output side, the distribution side. So you want to spill a few secrets and get in trouble with your company? Or what's coming up?
How about I do a good thing and get loved by my company and talk about
right.
Adobe Max is coming up later in October. And if you've attended or you've watched online afterward, we often have a research sneak where we kind of show some of those really high-end, high-concept AI and ML machine learning projects that are coming out of our research group. And we kind of give a little look. And it doesn't necessarily mean for sure that these are coming into the products. But if you look back at the last several years, you're going to see a lot of that technology, a lot of that just kind of out there innovation coming into Premiere, coming into Audition, and even the other applications. So, what I get excited about when I'm chatting with them is really how can we accomplish things that weren't actually possible before? No matter how good you are, how great your DAW or your skill set is, how sharp your razor on your old 24-track tape was, you can't always unbake the cake in the past and pull that perfect vocal sample or that guitar sample or something out of a mixed recording. But there's AI coming out now that's just doing this far better than anything we've ever seen, far better than the old ad in the back of the comic book to make a karaoke version of any song. That quality was okay for the time, but stuff that's coming out like that is just amazing. And so certainly what I like to see is how people can is what we can provide that let our users find new ways to be creative, not just new ways to do the old things that they've done before.
And if there's one thing this pandemic taught us is there's a need for content out there. There's a tremendous thirst for content. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I can't thank you enough for coming out. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Thank you to Adobe for sponsoring this panel and bringing us sort of a new way of working. Thank you, Durin. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Eric. I watch your programs, so come back for more.